Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar with Critica Ltd. I'm Dannika Warburton, the Investor Relations Representative for Critica, and I'm delighted to be joined by CEO Jacob Deysel, who's going to run through the significant recent progress at the Jupiter Rare Earths project in Western Australia, followed by a Q&A session.
Thanks very much, Dannika, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So first of all, I was really looking forward to this webinar and to speak to you all and give you a bit of an update on where we are. And it's a little bit of update across a few things, I think. And I want to start off just firstly by acknowledging the engagement by all our shareholders following our recent capital raise. There's been a lot of positive and constructive feedback, and I appreciate that. And today is really an opportunity to share a little bit of where we are, what's our technical progress so far, and how we continue to work on unlocking shareholder value. So I think we announced a very important metallurgical milestone yesterday again, and that was the second mixed rare earth oxide that we produced from Jupiter. And I'll walk through that in a little while. And then lastly, I think in terms of just our strategy remains to build Australia's next rare earth developer. We are continuing to systematically de-risking Jupiter and obviously advancing our flow sheet. And the next steps is moving forward with a scoping study. Now, with funding secured, I think we are ready and we're moving with great momentum into 2026. So to just come back a little bit in terms of why Critica exists, why this is specifically a moment that probably matters, and why Jupiter stands out in the space. And I think to talk about just the global context a little bit, the world is really facing this structural shortage of rare earths, and specifically the magnet rare earths. And these are essential components that goes into electric vehicles, AI, robotics, defense, decarbonization. So they are these quiet enablers of modern life. And wherever you are sitting at the moment, there's probably 15, if not all 17 of these elements around you. Now, I think these elements are a very small component of input costs into final products, but they are absolutely irreplaceable. And even a minor supply disruption here can halt complete industries. And I think that's why it's so important and why Critica and Jupiter is just so important. Rare earths really have this exceptional price elasticity that's very low cost input into final products, but they are absolutely irreplaceable. And we've seen that there's now this geopolitical and strategic issue and risk, given the fact that it's not just a commodity, but it's this essential part into this modern technology. And Western governments, manufacturers are really looking and seeking to find secure, transparent, non-Chinese supply. And again, this to me is where Jupiter really stands out. Now, why the timing for us is exceptional is there's definitely a shift in Western policy in terms of diversification. In Western countries and manufacturers are aligning at the moment to build this new rare earth supply chain outside of China. And we've seen this, a lot of cooperation, the US, Australian strategic and critical metals framework. And this is not just, a driver for Critica, but it is a really important tailwind in this industry. And we've seen a lot of announcements recently with governments really making capital available to shore up this supply chain and move this forward. So it is a priority out there. And I think it is projects that really have that's large, that's got low risk, that's in this position to have scale, sustainability, social license, but also jurisdiction premium that is going to benefit. And to me, Jupiter and Critica's Jupiter really is a perfect fit. Now, having said that, in terms of grant funding, I wanted to just address this. There's significant funding available. We are still at the early stage. We are running this race with a lot of competing projects at the moment, and I think it's those projects that can rapidly de-risk and demonstrate strong economics that will ultimately gain access to this pool. And I think that's precisely why we moved forward with a timely funding piece here. It allows Critica really to de-risk. It allows us to continue this momentum and move to the scoping study. And scoping study is a very key priority for us, as it's almost that catalyst that will start putting us in a position to qualify for some of this funding levers potentially going forward. Now, having said that, Critica stands out, and we spoke about this previously as well, but Jupiter is just absolutely global relevant. If you compare it to our competitors in terms of scale, we are the largest, we are the highest grade, but we also have a big bias towards these higher value magnetic rare earths. So with 1.8 billion tons a resource, it's absolutely a strategic asset. Now, simplicity is really the big differentiator for us here. And I think, again, I cannot emphasize more that being a clay-hosted system is extremely important, because that we have shown now consistently have allowed us to do upfront beneficiation. We've been able to reduce the mass by 95%, get the 6 to 10% uplift before we go to hydrometallurgy. And all of this, to me, ultimately should translate into smaller circuits, lower reagents, and lower OPEX. And that's what our scoping study will test as well. Now, we've now produced 2 independent mixed rare earth products. So this is significant in the sense that these products have also been produced from independent domains across Jupiter. So it shows that our flow sheet is not just repeatable in terms of what we have achieved so far, but it's also repeatable across some of the mineralogy and the domains across the project. And then, of course, something that's extremely exciting that we've reported a few weeks ago on is that there's also line of sight in terms of byproducts. So gallium is the first piece that we are looking at. We know we do have scandium. We've got some germanium in the resource, so we're working on that. And the gallium itself, and I believe the rest of it as well, are essentially produced through the same flow sheet that's producing the mixed rare earth oxide. So it's not a change in focus. It's not a change in the flow sheet. It's the same flow sheet. So this beneficiate our first means that we have that potential to have a smaller footprint in terms of the hydrometallurgy piece. We're already lower in terms of exceptionally low in uranium and thorium. So all of this adds to that sustainability profile. And of course, that will make it a lot more important to manufacturers and financiers going forward. Then another key piece that I've mentioned before as well is just the jurisdiction premium and being in Western Australia versus some of our competitors. We're in a tier 1 location, both from a governance perspective. We've got very predictable approval processes. Native title has been extinguished. It's pastoral land, flat terrain, so it's already very strong infrastructure and really low risk operational environment. And I think that puts us in a significant competitive advantage, for argument's sake, if you look at some of the projects in South America, for argument's sake, in terms of just the increased focus on environmental aspects that's developing. And I think the reason the West is building a supply chain, one of the key reasons around that has been always because of the sustainability piece, the environmental, social aspect. And Jupiter being in Western Australia is obviously a significant key to that. Then and lastly, I think just to bring this, before I jump into the recent product that we've produced, we have seen that China really dominates the rare earth space. They dominate the rest of the critical minerals in terms of gallium, germanium, and the likes. There are no substitutes for any of these products, and demand is just absolutely accelerating. And Critica, being part of this Western aligned supply chain, I think we do have the magnet rare earth oxide bias in our resource. We've got byproduct potential here. And we've now shown that we have a beneficiated-first flow sheet. We've got a repeatable flow sheet and repeatability there, which we are moving forward. So it is all bringing it all together, I suppose, is the scale. Jupiter is in a class of its own. The simplicity around our flow sheet, the fact that we have now line of sight all the way from the resource right through to two products that we have produced, the mixed rare earth oxides, and then just simply being in a tier 1 location, which gives us that priority when it comes to sovereignty, stability, and permitting certainty. So that's probably a little bit of context, and just again give you a bit of excitement around Critica. If I move on, just in terms of the announcement we had yesterday in terms of the second high-grade mixed rare earth oxide. To me, this is again extremely important, very exciting for us. In fact, that we produced the second product from a different metallurgical domain within the resource, and the significance here is really the fact that it is across the resource. So we have now shown that we produce the same high quality product through the same flow sheet. That, to me, reinforces this beneficiation-first piece, and we have systematically been working through this. And it's started off with a 50-kilogram lab sample. We've then increased that to 400-kilogram bulk sample. That has moved into our first mixed rare earth oxide. We've now done the second one, so it just really confirms to me that robustness, but also the scalability in the sense of the path going forward. And then to talk a little bit about this product itself, it was produced through the same process, so it was an acid bake process. This new product was 86% TREO, so this is significant high TREO product. Within that, 24.7% of that was magnet rare earths, and those are the four, just to remind you: neodymium, praseodymium, terbium, dysprosium, and they carry usually about 80 to 90% of the basket value of most projects. And we've also shown that yttrium, which is obviously one of the heavy rare earths, and we've seen that significant supply constraint in the space, that yttrium has upgraded significantly by 30,000%. So from where we were in the resource at about 74 parts per million, all the way to 2.4% in this mixed rare earth oxide. So again, all of this is information that will essentially flow into our scoping study. In terms of rare earths, the magnet rare earths itself, as we announced, the upgrades there was between 40 and 60,000%. If you pull that through from resource all the way through to this product itself. In terms of where we're going from here, the next steps, so we will continue with the systematic de-risking of this technical piece, and just really having that technical discipline. Near-term priorities for us is we are starting the commissioning of the pilot plant in Cavacue. This is really going to continue to produce more information, optimizing our flow sheet, especially on the beneficiation-first piece, and that's all feeding into the scoping study. On the hydrometallurgy side, so these two products we produced so far, it's only the start. We're running a number of processes and programs still parallel with ANSTO, Cavacue, Immunotech, and we'll continue to release information as that becomes available. And there is a range of products here that we are exploring, and obviously having a look at what's the best suited for Critica, and also from an economic development perspective. There is this aspect that we have this We are absolutely a rare earth first project, but we do have the ability to produce byproducts, and I think we've seen some line of sight on that. We will continue to do as per the announcement. We're doing some resource drilling both in Jupiter to do just further confirm the resource, and then in Brothers we're looking at doing some drilling work in that space to further look at growth beyond Jupiter at the moment. The scoping study, I think we've mentioned that's really the key part for us, with the intention of delivering that towards the first half of 2026. And then we continue, as a result of being able to produce a product, we're starting to look at the specifications around that, and we engage with potential off-takers to move that forward. And I think, again, to clarify that as well, because I think it's important to understand that there's still work to be done here from a technical and commercial perspective with regards to the products that we are producing. But it's very important that we are now on the radar of potential off-takers, and we'll continue to engage and have these conversations, early stage conversations, and build those relationships as we move forward. So I know that's been probably quite a mouthful, and I'm sure there's a few questions already, but I do want to address just a few things that I know that shareholders have reached out to me during the course of the last couple of weeks, and that's the aspect around the recent placement, SPPs, and the option for retail to participate. And I think just to give a bit of context around this, that I think in terms of Critica, in terms of Jupiter, we absolutely have a tier one asset in the space. We want to be and going to be a cornerstone in the supply chain piece here, but we are operating in a very volatile market, and sentiment has shifted, and it's not just in the space of Critica, it's really the broader market macro conditions, and we've seen this across industries, that there's this risk off environment that continue to affect not just ourselves but also other smaller caps in this space, and it is in that backdrop that it's critical to move very quickly and secure funding in a structured and a structured process that de-risks the company's finances and financial position as we move forward. And we wanted to obviously get that done before the end of the year, so that we can maintain that momentum and we can move forward. And I think to that effect, the board and management has really looked at all options here, and we found that a straight placement was the most efficient, was the most timely and most reliable option to secure the capital that's required for the business. Now, the question I have received is why SPP was not offered. And as I mentioned, the board has considered multiple options here, inclusive of the SPP. But it is this, I think we have to recognize the market volatility here, the execution risk here, and the need for us to move forward, maintain momentum, get that funding certainty, and to that point, placement with institutions and sophisticated investors seemed to be the most effective structure. Now, what that allowed Critica to do is to secure funding very quickly. This is going to keep the momentum here. It's going to keep our metallurgical program running. The preparation as we move into the scoping study is now on track. And I think it's extremely important in this space to maintain that momentum, because we are running a race here and there's a lot of competitors, and it's extremely important for us to be in a position where we don't slow down this process. So now what we have achieved with this race, and I think this is going to be very supportive to the long-term value of the company, as we broaden the register. We brought in a number of high quality institutions here. That's really here for us and with the rest of our shareholders to be very supportive and see us through in the long term. So I think there's this, we've gained some broadening of the register here with shareholders as per our retail shareholders as well. That's very, very supportive to us and as we move forward. Now, I think another aspect, just to probably just give a bit more color on why the SPP is an aspect that kind of can tend to draw out funding. It can tend to essentially put downward pressure on the share price, and we didn't feel that that's the appropriate way to move forward. SPP, there's prospectus involved, there's additional cost and administration burden that we had to take into consideration. It does put short-term pressure on the share price, and we didn't think that, in this market that suppresses pricing and in this lead up to an SPP, and that would be counterproductive to all our existing shareholders. So in the best interest, we decided to move forward with efficient funding as outlined, to maintain that momentum and not unnecessarily create dilution or timetable risk. We did include one of the other aspects that I just also want to address on this is we included options were included in this raise, and again, to incentivize institution support at this stage to broaden the register. That was one of the aspects that was required. So it is a market-driven piece. The exercise price of that was set at a premium, so as to ensure that long-term value creation. And this is a relatively standard practice in the development and funding of projects going forward. So I think with all of that, probably I'll bring it to a close, and I'll then open up for yourself, Dannika, to I'm sure there's many questions, but I think today really that second mixed rare of oxide is a significant moment for us in this technical journey. We've got funding in place. This really puts us in a good stead in terms of moving forward to the scoping study. I'm extremely excited about that, being a mining engineer and having built these operations in previous lives. I'm really excited about this piece. Critica is absolutely uniquely positioned. We've got the scale, we've got simplicity, we've got the flow sheet that's working. We're in a tier 1 location in WA, and there's really strong tailwinds in this market. There's a lot of volatility, I would give that, but there's strong tailwinds. The West need to build a supply chain, and we are an absolute project that stands out. So I think there is a tranche 2 resolution that will go to the shareholders for approval, and support will be greatly appreciated, as that will continue to keep us moving, keep that momentum going, and make sure that we keep ahead of the race here. So with all of that, I've been rambling on a lot for probably too long there, Dannika. I'm sorry. I'll open to you for questions.
Thank you, Jacob. No, very detailed overview, and appreciate that you've answered a lot of the questions that came through that I was going to ask you. So I guess to start with, you just a question that's come through from Gavin on the Q&A. He says you refer to 2 products being made. This implies it is to a specification acceptable to customers. Is that correct?
Look, I think these are 2 initial products that we have produced. We have engaged with downstream off-takers to get a sense of requirements in terms of specifications, but we still have more optimization to do. To me, I think the important piece here to think about, this is the first 2 products that came off the line, and they were exceptionally high in terms of grade. So we will work now with off-takers in terms of how we optimize these products going forward, and making sure that we're on the radar screen of potential off-takers.
Mm-hmm. And the most asked question was actually, you spoke about moving with speed, and a lot of people asked about the pathway to production. So can you step us through the key milestones from here based on today's plans and your best estimate of when Critica could realistically move into production at Jupiter, assuming all things go to plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the thing is we're following a very standard stage engineering pathway here. So the pilot plant operation is key for us. As I mentioned, there's a lot of input into our scoping study. The scoping study is really a high-level economic technical assessment. So moving us through concept, looking at the scale, the flow sheet, operating philosophy and parameters, and the key value drivers. And I think all of that is moving then forward in terms of pathway with permitting, infrastructure, downstream options, and so forth. So that's a very key piece. Following from the scoping study is a pre-feasibility study, and that's where there's a bit more engineering involved. So we're really getting down into the bolts and nuts here. We get a better understanding of the operating and capital costs around that, the mine planning, the environmental baselines, and so forth. So that follows a scoping study, and then you normally move into a definitive feasibility study, and here you get your final design, your final engineering pieces done before you move on to final investment decision. Now, to unpack that very broadly, the scoping study is we're aiming to deliver that by the middle of next year. A pre-feasibility study is probably a 12 months process. Definitive feasibility, 18 to 24 months. So and then you get into construction and commissioning, and that's probably about a 2-year process. So if all goes to plan and very indicative only, you would potentially be in a position with commissioning 2029, 2030, give or take, depending on how smooth things run. But that would be a very indicative timeline in terms of development of the project.
Okay, thank you. And Raylene and Mark have asked a question on the flow sheet. I guess to provide an analogue for investors, can you explain how does Critica's flow sheet compare to a producer like Lynas? I mean, given there's different host rocks and rare earth distribution, is there any sort of benefits or cons that you can see at this stage of the process?
Yeah. So look, I think the one of the key things that stood out for me when I looked at Critica initially is the fact that we are clay-hosted mineralization. So I think this is really fundamental, and it's fundamental different to hard rock producers, right? And the piece for me that when I look at Critica, it's about the fact that mining, we don't require drilling and blasting. Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. Our mineralization is very close to the surface. Because we're a clay-hosted project and we are not ionic, it allows us to beneficiate up front. And I think this is an extremely important piece because the minerals that we are looking, so our rare earths, our critical minerals are all contained in the fine minerals within the clay, which means that through very benign processes, we can wash that away and concentrate these minerals. Now, those minerals specifically are secondary minerals. So if you look at hard rock, these are monazite deposits usually. Monazite is a mineral that requires relatively strong reagents to be able to break it up. We are a secondary mineral, which in theory should be able to be broken up and produced into the various elements by a more benign type of process. And that's what we are doing with all of these flow sheet that we're running at the moment. So all of these projects are fairly unique in that sense. The flow sheets are fairly unique, and that's why we're going through these processes to systematically de-risk the project. But I think when I look at Critica, there's a number of aspects that stand out for me that, from a sustainability piece, from a cost perspective piece, and that's what the scoping study will show us. But the mining piece is a relatively straightforward, should be much more simpler, and the fact that we don't have to drill and blast. Beneficiate up front allows us to reduce the mass significantly. So our hydrometallurgy piece is a much more potentially a much smaller footprint, and with that smaller footprint comes potential lower capital, lower OPEX, but also lower environmental footprint, which I think is extremely important. And what we've shown now, that flow sheet can produce a final product. It's also the same flow sheet that has shown that there's potential for byproducts here. And if you lay on top of that extremely low uranium and thorium, which adds to the environmental sustainability piece here, but allows this product that we'll produce to be extremely exportable to sensitive parts of the world without being restricted. And then lastly, just being in Western Australia adds to that operational environment where we are. So probably a little bit more about the rest of it, but I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And you mentioned the mining piece. We've had a few questions come through. I mean, some shareholders have asked why Critica hasn't put any diamond core holes underneath the existing rare earth intercepts. But our last one from Malcolm, he says, when is further drilling likely to occur? And with the view that info will be fed into upgrading the resource into a measured category. Yeah. Is there any plans for drilling?
Absolutely. So that's part of the funds that were raised. Is we are planning further, just out of a meeting actually with my team, planning the further drilling program for Jupiter. So, and that is to upgrade the resource from inferred to indicated, which is part of the scoping study and work. And then there's also further work that we are planning to look at the rest of the brothers. Satellite deposits that we have identified, to do more work there in terms of the wider regional growth of the resource. In terms of it is correct in terms of we do have this intrusion below. We have been focusing on obviously the clay hosted, because it gives us this advantage, as I mentioned. But yes, there's further mineralization below. We have done some diamond core drilling before, but it's something that we'll look into in future. But if you look at Jupiter, if you look at brothers, if you look at what is on top, we have, just hundreds and hundreds of years of life potentially before we even have to worry about what's at the bottom. So it will be in a few hundred years, someone else will explore the bottom, I'm sure. But yeah, it is something we have looked at before.
Mm-hmm, thank you. And looking beyond the scoping study and regarding funding, is Critica actively pursuing any state or federal government grants or incentives under the Albanese government critical minerals and industry policies?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And absolutely, we are actively assessing, state and federal grant programs that align specifically with critical minerals. We are positioned within Australia, US Critical Minerals Partnership, and we've seen some funding that has been deployed through the US specifically, and bilateral channels to projects outside of the US, and we continue to obviously explore those. I think all of those programs are really going to focus on scale, strategic relevance, this Western aligned supply chain, of which Jupiter obviously aligns very strongly with. A key piece for us, however, is we do need to move forward in terms of getting to the scoping study. And I think that was why it's important to maintain this momentum, get the funding to not slow down, because we need that catalyst. I think that's really going to put us in a position to have meaningful conversations with regards to grants or any other non-dilutive type of funding. So we will continue to do that. We are doing it at the moment in terms of just making sure that everyone is aware of us, and as we move through the timeline and development of Jupiter, we'll access some of those where appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess on the investment side as well, someone in the chat has asked about another ASX listed company that I'm not going to name was recently compromised by some major investors in China. When you're looking at the global markets and from, I guess, an investment perspective, but also from selling your magnet rare earths products into these global markets, are there any considerations that come through from government policy that may influence the decision to move forward on either of those angles?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Critica is free to sell into the global market, and those are, obviously commercial decisions that will be informed by pricing and alignment and policy setting. I think where we are based in Australia, Australia has long been seen as an ally to the West in terms of critical metals production, and we continue to tap into those discussions and forums. But I mean, in terms of government policy, may influence where strategic minerals are most valued, and that might direct how we move forward. But at the moment, we've got as a commercial entity, we've got flexibility, and I think that's extremely important in this space.
Brilliant. Thank you. And a question from Stephen, Felicity, and Brian have sort of asked the same question. I guess beyond Jupiter, what is the realistic strategy for the tin projects in Tasmania, Mount Lindsay and Mount Livingstone? Are these assets candidates for development by Critica, either by a joint venture or potential sale to help fund Jupiter? Or when would you, if you're going to develop them, when would you meaningfully reactivate those projects? Hopefully I've summarized that well enough. There was three different sorts of questions.
Well, hopefully I can answer it properly, but I think the Tasmanian projects remain key assets to the company and for our shareholders. Jupiter and the rare earth focus is obviously our main focus, but Mount Lindsay gives us strategic optionality, and we will continue to explore options to unlock shareholder value, and that might be through a range of various arrangements. But as I said, priority really remains firmly with advancing Jupiter in this rare earth space.
Okay. And Stephen has asked, will shareholders be kept up to date about strategy costs and any plans? And I'm assuming you're going to answer yes to that one. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think this is the second webinar we have. And I obviously enjoy being on these and give our investors a bit more understanding of where we're going, but also the questions that's coming out, and we'll continue to make sure that investors are informed as we move forward.
Great. And I know we've gone a little bit over time, so I've tried to answer all the questions. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to email us. Details are on the bottom of the ASX announcements. But to wrap up with Jacob, for maybe a new shareholder considering Critica as a long-term investment, how would you summarize the company's vision over the next few years, and what are the key drivers of shareholder value in your mind?
Yeah, I think I'm probably at fault for dragging this out a little bit. I was talking too much, but I think fantastic question. I think over the next decade, our vision at Critica is to be a tier one Western aligned supplier of magnet and strategic minerals and rare earths, and it's really built on the fact that we've got the scale, we've got the simplicity, we've got strategic relevance of the Jupiter project itself. And I think for shareholders, long-term value creation comes really from those four core drivers in the sense of scale. We've got an enormous resource as it is, but we've got growth potential, optionality as we move Jupiter forward. The simplicity piece here is extremely important. The fact that we have enduring competitive advantages here in the sense that our geology works with our metallurgy. We've got low uranium and thorium profile, so it's a clean potential for smaller lower cost flow sheet. And I think those are key competitive advantages. The fact that we are Western aligned, I think is important. Jurisdiction we are operating out of. And as we said, there is absolutely tailwinds in this industry. The West need to build a supply chain. It's not a choice. And, Jupiter is just the absolute strategic asset in the mix here. And then we will continue to execute and de-risk the project as we move forward. And then I think beyond, Jupiter, we are striving to build organizational depth, partnerships, and capability to ensure that there's long-term development, financing, and market access for Jupiter itself. And ultimately, delivering on the project with the objective of delivering sustainable long-term value to our shareholders.
Well, thank you, Jacob. And I think if anyone's going to execute that vision, it's going to be you and your team. So once again, thank you to shareholders and investors that joined the call. Please do reach out if we didn't cover your question. A replay of this webinar will be available tomorrow on the company's website, and we'll also email it to you. So thanks for your time, Jacob. It was great to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See you next time. Thank you.